All right, hello everyone, and thanks again for joining one of the ViewSource conference stream session interviews with speakers from all over the world who are going to come to ViewSource in late September, early October in Amsterdam. If you happen to be around, please join as well. And today I have a privilege to introduce one of the speakers who likes CSS, code and people. What a strange combination that is. And that's Tejas Kumar. Now currently connecting with us from Berlin. Is that correct, Tejas?
Yeah. Hello from Berlin, the land of curried sausage.
Yes. How are you feeling today? Is it sunny? Is it rainy? What is it like?
It's kind of both. It's it was sunny, but now there is sun, but it's covered with clouds, and it's I think it's just classic Berlin.
So I was reading up your biography and also what you're going to speak about, and one thing kind of confused me a little bit. You started coding when you were 8,
I
right?
did.
And
Yes.
so tell me now, looking back at the past and looking back, like maybe looking forward into the future, I'm curious. Like, no, I think that you're a little bit older than 8 now, I believe. So
Just a little
just a
mentally.
little. All right. I don't think so, but how do you see CSS evolving, or how has it changed over all these years? Do we have CSS at the best state of it, which it ever has been, or is there still a lot of work to do? Probably yes, right?
Yeah,
But I'm just curious, how do you feel about this evolution, or how did things evolve
yeah,
over
I
time?
love it, man. I really love where CSS is today. And this is coming from someone who, I was working on the web platform. It wasn't, of course, full-time work, right? Child labor is illegal, but I was, playing around building website. I made my first website when I was like 13. It was in a magazine. I have the magazine. And I remember thinking, wow, man, rounded corners are hard, because you have these like GIFs that's the same color as your background color, but with a white clipped area. You had hacks, and then how you position them. Well, good luck, right? Like float left, clear both. I like it was, it was not pleasant. So we've gone from like clear fix to Flexbox, which is incredible. I've watched this happen, and I've adopted Flexbox as it was, coming up, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is and now we have, of course, grid, and coming up in the future there's subgrid, which is not yet, I think, fully out, but soon. And I think it's going amazing, especially as someone who's felt the pain of dealing with positioning and rounded corners and tabular layouts that are now just easy with grid. So it's taken time, I think, but maybe not, right? I'm typically a kind of person who moves fast, and I'm fast and reckless versus slow and careful. And really you achieve the same goal, but it's a question of time. And so I think CSS maybe has been slow but really careful, in that it's robust now. I don't think I still think there's parts of it that I find hard. And I think if it was perfect, then there'd be no more work to do. So I think it is, in my opinion, the best that it's ever been, but I can already see room for improvement, as many people can. So subgrid I think of as one example, but also um, this gap attribute doesn't yet fully exist for Flexbox, though it does for grid, which it would be really nice if I had a Flexbox and I could specify a gap between my flex elements. And so there's more details like that where it's still a little bit awkward, um, as well as the odd cases of my absolutely positioned things are somehow not absolutely positioned because of overflow, etc. So yeah, there's quirks, but I think over time it's evolved to be something incredibly beautiful.
Yes, there's still some work to be done there, that's for
Yeah.
sure. But it's also interesting that you're mentioning this because I remember vividly the time when I was kind of so frustrated because frankly, I was, when I was developing back in early 2000s and stuff, I wasn't really reading the spec that much.
Yeah.
So I would know that float left works and I would know that float right works, but then I would try to desperately do things like float top important, bang important, and float
Yeah.
bottom, and it just wouldn't do what I wanted to do, and it was super, super confusing. I think that we moved a long way from there.
Definitely.
And now also we see all these fancy things coming up, like CSS Houdini is one of them, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious if you think about this evolution of things and grid layout, of course, and subgrid. How do you see the way we write CSS changing as the time passes by? So, we never need a JavaScript module, you just npm install and then you have it. But for CSS, we kind of need to copy paste, fiddle a little bit with the snippet and try to make it work for a layout we're given. Do you see that the way we're writing CSS today will become more like writing JavaScript, or is it a very, very different thing?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time, at web events, web conferences, and web chat groups, and various web things. And what I'm seeing more, unfortunately, is that there seems to be an increasing number of people, an increasing number, a circle that's increasing in radius of people who don't use CSS, at least don't use CSS on the web platform kind of directly. They'll often use it with this type of CSS and JS approach. Um, and there's mixed opinions about it, but I think that way already of writing CSS is different, and it's something that has grown a lot, for better or for worse. But I think with CSS that's just easier because of the npm ecosystem. You can npm install a styled component in whatever component framework you're using, and so you don't really have to write the style to yourself, right? You can. There are some CSS systems like Bulma. Bootstrap was one back in the day, where you npm install it and import your CSS files. But I'm really excited about Houdini because it modularizes CSS in a way that you can import these worklets, and you can build abstractions on the worklets and allow users to use them. And that is something that I think it'll be interesting to see how that develops. I would personally love like a Houdini ecosystem of sorts. A Houdini as a spec is still, not fully final, and there's a lot of work to be done. But what I've always loved about CSS, although since I was 8 years old until today, what I've loved about CSS is that it is, I think, the most declarative programming language on earth. And there's people who will say it's not declarative, or who will say it's not a programming language, but I disagree. I think it is a programming language. It's just so high level. You display grid and then you forget about it. And I think Houdini allows us to extend that so much more beautifully, where someone could create a masonry layout using the Houdini layout worklet, right? And then just, I say, display masonry. This is not part of the CSS spec, but it just works because it has been extended by Houdini. So I think, how are people going to write CSS in the future? I don't really know concretely, but I think that's the way I'd like to use CSS with Houdini. Is just like I import a module based on the Houdini APIs and use CSS as declarative as it is already, extended with these plugins, so to speak.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And also, in many ways, I can see it would be kind of nice to be able to have an established ecosystem of CSS components, because at this point, everybody is. So, I mean, we have frameworks, right? But if you need something as small as, let's say, a reliable cross-browser date picker,
Yeah.
you kind of need to find your way or just build one, right? And
Yeah.
then, of course, it depends on the hooks you will have to use if you're writing it, let's say, for React, or if you're writing it for, whatever framework of choice you're going to use. So that's something that I'm kind of also looking forward to. But at the same time, what I'm wondering at this point sometimes, I mean, we developed a very strong foundation, very strong set of tools for testing JavaScript, right? And for testing our flows of applications. But when it comes to testing CSS, it seems like it hasn't hasn't progressed as much. I mean, we can do visual regression testing,
Yeah.
where we can essentially match one screenshot against the other and see what the differences are. But especially in the world where everything is responsive, it's becoming more and more difficult to be certain that when you're changing one thing in your CSS file in one place, because of a cascade, it might affect many, many other places.
Yeah.
And so I find it personally extremely difficult to even introduce the concept of CSS testing when I'm working with developers or designers. So what are your thoughts on that? Or what is the state maybe of CSS testing? If it is it even possible?
Yeah, I mean, there's been efforts, right? There's tools like I think of CSS lint that is not really automated testing, but will also warn you of dangerous abuses of the cascade. I think of there's a tool called Barista, if I recall correctly, and Barista was kind of like Mocha but for CSS, which was a really cool idea where you expect this class name to have this background. You write these assertions, and you can run that on CI. I think that's a really novel way of ensuring your CSS contains certain properties. Um, yeah, I think the state of testing CSS, as I've said in previously, is it's the hardest part of writing CSS kind of just raw, in my opinion, are, you can't nest selectors. And so you either end up with often long chains of selectors that may not be readable or using like Sass, right? Moreover, you can nest some things. So media queries, keyframes, these are nestable. Supports queries, for example. And maintaining class names. So in the past, we've had like BEM and these other conventions that, from my experience, I haven't figured out a way to scale them well. And so for these reasons, I think a lot of people are adopting, again, that's the CSS and JS style of approach to solve exactly this problem. Because what I've seen is the CSS and JS ecosystem will generate a unique class name for you, so you don't have to worry about that. And that way, that there can't be cascade abuse because you're not directly addressing class names. It's hidden, which again makes it easier to test. So I've seen a lot of automated testing of CSS, just done comparing the hashes of class names. And if a hash changed, then watch out, your CSS may have changed. But I think, yeah, you're totally right in that there's definitely room to improve raw web platform CSS automated testing. Although for like regressions, I know I have a friend at Sauce Labs who's doing some really cool stuff there in terms of automated CSS testing. But one really concrete tool that I can think of, and this is CSS testing, but it's not really testing the code as much as it's testing the output of the code, which in essence matters more than the code, I think. It's what do customers see? Do they see visual regressions or not? There's this tool that I've had my eye on for a while. Cypress, we're using Cypress already for end-to-end tests, but there's a plugin for a tool called Applitools AI, which uses AI to compare the visuals of your app and tell you if there's a visual regression or not based on its intelligence system. And of course, there's a gradient of error. So you say, well, this is a false positive, but the more you do that, the more the app learns and recognizes regressions. And this is something that can even run on CI. And so we're actually looking into that where I work to see if we can have a more robust product.
Oh, that sounds very interesting. In the same way, like if you can see, as we see, for example, guest.js showing
Yeah.
up, which essentially tries to use machine learning as well and the heuristics about the previous behavior, past behavior of users to predict if that link, that particular link, or that interactive element is going to be interacted with. Then let's
Exactly.
preload some Webpack chunks that do that. Oh,
Totally.
that's an interesting way of kind of integrating artificial intelligence in a way, or machine learning, into our workflow.
Yeah, there's also like a friend of mine, David Piano. I don't know if Piano is his. David Khurshid, my bad, Khurshid. Yeah, he is the author of this really great library, XState, for managing the state of your applications. And if you think about machine learning, a lot of it is mostly about weights, right? And so his app models finite state machines for applications, and he's been looking into assigning weights to various state transitions in order to predict the next most likely state transition for a specific user. This is kind of like guest.js, but instead of prefetching links, it takes the user down different UX paths based on what they like. For example, if they delete a favorite or if they delete something, you ask them, why did you delete it? You present them with a form. And if they keep skipping the form, that state transition keeps increasing in weight, therefore becomes their preferred way of using the app. I don't want to fill out a form. And so then the app knows this and just skips the form altogether and giving them a nicer UX that they want. So these applications for machine learning and AI and UI engineering, I think is really exciting. And I like that it's making its way even into CSS with, Applitools.
Wow, that's extremely exciting. So, is it also something that you're going to speak about at the conference, or is the talk going to be about the state of CSS and the state of the CSS of the platform? Because I believe that's the official or maybe unofficial title. So, what will you cover in your session?
That's a good question. So we'll talk about, the CSS. We'll talk about kind of the past, the present, and the future. And we'll look at more specific. We'll look at. I really want to talk more about where it's going, um, in depth, and also some common things that I believe could be more well known but aren't. For example, I work on a team, as everybody does, as many people do, and a lot of times to center something is a debate in code review, right? It's a fair point because sometimes you want to display flex and justify content. Other times you want to set the margins to automatic. So which one wins? Another common point of discussion in teams is who owns the margin, right? So you have a card, you have a button, who owns the market? And there are answers to this that maybe are not 100% absolutist, but that are considered maybe not best practices, but good praxis. So steps in the right direction. And it's kind of looking at these questions and how we solve them with modern web platform CSS, without frameworks, without JavaScript libraries, without abstraction, just pure CSS. How can we solve some of these problems? We'll also talk a little bit about Houdini, the worklets. What can the paint worklet help me do? And so on.
So, the exciting stuff, huh?
Yeah, I love it, man.
Oh, you seem to be so excited. So, what are you most excited about in CSS today? So, what is that one thing that drives you and keeps you awake at night?
I've always loved that CSS is so declarative. Like I hear a lot about, oh, CSS is hard, CSS is hard, CSS is hard, it is. Like I'm looking here at a window that has blinds, and I think of this GIF with like Peter Griffin, and yes, I get that there's a cascade, but we cannot disagree with the fact that it is so declarative, and in a sense welcoming. Like background red is something someone with no coding background at all can just write and create a living experience on the web. That is so exciting. But that's something that's always excited me. But perhaps at this point in time, what I'm most excited about is that CSS is becoming more, it seems to be, as a specification, as a standard, is becoming more open and inclusive, kind of like TC39 and the ECMAScript standard. People, users of CSS, are getting more of a say in the specification of how should the language develop. And I think Houdini will play a key role in this because it allows you to build, kind of like Babel does in the JS world, it allows you to actually build the language and make your case, even if it's just a straw man, make your case for the future of the language. So that's something I'm really excited about, is the extensibility of CSS is growing.
So, just to make sure, you're not advocating for every single website to have background red. Is that correct?
No, no.
No, okay. I just wanted to make sure because I know websites that are red sometimes. Some people don't like it, some people do. That's totally outside of the point of this conversation. But one other question I did want to ask you though. So looking at the kind of really nice evolution of how we evolved and how we're evolving, and it seems like the acceleration in speed of development of CSS is just incredible. And it's been, I can't even, I mean, many of us cannot even predict what's going to happen, in years or two, because of course it's all up to us developers to find out what we're interested in and give feedback to the working group and all. But in the end, predicting what the future holds for us is just unrealistic. But still, I am curious. So if you look at the state of the web today, maybe CSS, maybe like the web per se, or maybe the way we work, the way we build. If there was one thing that you could change, or you would like to change over the next few years, what would it be? So if there was that something, that one holy grail that's on your agenda for the next years that you'd like to have resolved by the end of 2021, let's say, what is it? Tell us your secrets.
So you're talking about the web platform in general? One thing that I'd like to change?
Potentially, yeah, but it could be pretty much anything. If there was a particular problem that you want to solve, tackle, what is it?
I think and this may sound a little bit, cynical, but I think the biggest problem on the web is myself and unfortunately my fellow humans. We love each other very much in theory, but we don't do a good job of it. I think sometimes on code reviews or on Twitter, um, there's often a lot of, oh, just solve it this way. Oh, just do this. And there's a lot of, mansplaining, and there's a lot of um, kind of respectful communication that I think can be missing. There's gender stereotyping. There's kind of this assumed knowledge that everyone's expected to have. And oh my gosh, how dare you ask me about who owns the margin? Unbelievable. What are you, a junior? And so I think that for me is the biggest problem on the web platform is we have amazing tools. We have CSS, we have JavaScript, we have HTML. Each one is becoming more open and extensible. But as humans, I don't think, well, we're definitely getting better, absolutely. But what I'd like to see solved ultimately is culture. I'd like us to engage with one another in ways that are more welcoming, more respectful. And this is also what I like about CSS. I mentioned this already. I like that it's welcoming. Background color value. I'd like humans to kind of be just that welcoming and respectful as well.
Oh, that's a very nice ending of the conversation. And actually, that's also the point that's been brought up by many people I've been speaking already with. So I think that we're all kind of on board. It just requires quite a bit of work and commitment, just because everybody is running, everybody is trying to, fix a bug or, choose the perfect framework and all. I think we all are united in our goals. We just need to push forward, and it's probably going to take a bit of time. But
Yeah.
I'm really happy to see us all on track here.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we are good so far. Thank you so much for for your time and for all your wonderful insight to us. And I'm looking forward to see you in Amsterdam.
Yeah. See you in
I
Amsterdam.
think it might be raining, unlike in Berlin today. Or is it
Uh,
raining after all?
it might be actually today. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I guess you're prepared. So take your umbrella. Don't forget the umbrella. All right. I'll see you there.
All
And
right.
thanks everyone for joining. And see you next time.
See you next time. Goodbye.
Bye bye.